Hey everyone. Alisa's story is supposedly fairly short, but it's quite fragmented and has many little details that I wanted to cover, so it ended up being a bit longer than I expected. Also, it has quite a few gaps, with some parts that are not fully explained. This is partly due to the nature of this particular story, and what happened in certain parts is mostly implied by the outcome. That said, I decided to cover some of these gaps myself, just to give the overall story a better flow for a summary. Some parts might be a bit confusing, but it's kind of meant to be, so hopefully everything will be clear in the end. Anyway, let's get into it. When she was very young, Alisa had been rescued and brought to a place called Utopia. Dr. Pickman was the person in charge of Utopia, and as she grew up, he became like a father for Alisa. Dr. Pickman was very well respected, and he treated everyone nicely. To make sure that everyone in Utopia lived happily, he had established a series of rules based on love, justice, and fairness. From the very beginning, Alisa had taken Dr. Pickman's teachings at heart, firmly believing what he preached. She quickly became a diligent and somewhat zealous child, and proudly memorized all the Utopia protocols. However, Dr. Pickman's real name was Kugawa Kurono. He was a doctor that worked at the start of life in Babylonia, but also a Kurono researcher that studied the mind. More specifically, his main research was mind fusion, one of the two primary branches on mind research that Kurono had been experimenting on. Many of the researches performed at Fort Winter were related to Project Attila and mind replication. However, Pickman believed that mind fusion would have been more successful. Kurono had always wanted to harness the power of the Ascension Network, and their ultimate goal was to turn humans into Ascendants. According to their research, in order to survive the filtering and connect to the Ascension Network, a construct required a strong, stable mind. And in order to obtain such a mind, Dr. Pickman wanted to utilize mind fusion, a process that will merge multiple lesser consciousnesses in order to create a stronger one. To facilitate his research, Kurono had assigned him one of their secret laboratories, still undetected by Babylonia. It consisted in a massive flying fortress with detachable sections that could land in different areas to collect samples. The simple process of extracting a consciousness will kill the person, but Kurono had provided him plenty of test subjects for his experiments. The issue was that fusing random consciousnesses together will cause a higher rejection rate, which will make the final consciousness very unstable. However, when Pickman had started to experiment on a batch of kids recently collected, he had noticed that the rejection rate during the mind fusion had been significantly lower. After learning that they all came from the same orphanage, Pickman started to suspect that this might have been a significant factor. People growing up in a similar environment and under the same social rules could have a higher affinity with one another, which will facilitate the process of mind fusion, leading to a lower rejection rate. His following experiments proved him right, and that was why he had decided to turn his laboratory base into a utopia. A place where people will live under a series of strict but fair rules, creating a closed, self-contained environment that will increase the affinity between people. One of the kids that he had collected had also sparked his interest. She was younger than the others that came from the orphanage, and no one seemed to know her. Dr. Pickman had named her Alisa, and had decided he would personally educate her, shaping her into his best sample. After all, merging multiple consciousnesses together was the easiest part of the experiment. The hardest part was finding a strong enough consciousness that would be able to withstand all the others that had been fused with it, acquiring control over the chaotic mess and becoming their leader. Since Alisa was still young, Dr. Pickman needed other constructs to continue his experiments, and he had ordered a high-quality batch of constructs for his next phase. Cecily was the captain of Silver Falcon, one of Babylonia's best elite squads. Zika and Nada were her teammates, and Arabella was their commandant. General Wells had been Cecily's instructor, and to this day he considered her one of his best students. One day, Silver Falcon had been assigned a new mission: eliminate the corrupted and hetero creatures nearby Conservation Area 112 and protect its citizens. It was supposed to be a relatively easy mission for an elite team like Silver Falcon, but after their deployment, their location had been swarmed by corrupted. Their request for immediate support had been ignored, and eventually the entire team had been almost wiped out by the corrupted seemingly lured in the area. Heavily injured, Cecily was still barely conscious when a Babylonian construct had found them on the battlefield. Despite the heavy injuries, Silver Falcon was still alive, but the construct had reported every single one of them as dead. He had been bribed by Kurono to falsify the report, confirming that Silver Falcon had been wiped out, but instead, the entire squad had been retrieved by the Aurora Squadron, Kurono's private force, and brought to Dr. Pickman in Utopia. They were the high-quality ingredients that he had ordered. Once imprisoned in Utopia, Cecily and the rest of Silver Falcon discovered that many other people and constructs had been brought there from other conservation areas. However, only a few of them had been captured, while most of them had joined willingly. Dr. Pickman was promising them food and shelter, and he had created a safe place for everyone as long as they respected the rules. On the surface, Utopia was indeed a good place, but what people didn't know was that Pickman was simply nurturing them into better samples for his experiments. Since the start, Silver Falcon had been planning a way to escape from Utopia, but it seemed like they would have no support from inside. They had leaked a lot of information about what was truly going on inside Utopia's laboratories, but no one had believed them. Everyone saw Pickman as their savior, and since many of them that had willingly joined Utopia had been desperate or cast-offs from other factions, they didn't really have a good alternative. During her captivity, Cecily had become quite fond of Alisa, one of the kids that had grown up in Utopia and that knew nothing about the outside world. Despite her naivety and zealous rigor in following Utopia's protocols, Alisa was a good kid, the only flower that had sprouted from Utopia's rotten soil. She didn't know about Dr. Pickman's true intentions, but through her, Cecily had learned a lot about Utopia. Alisa herself had started to see Cecily as an older sister, and in between her lessons and duties, she always spent a lot of time with Cecily, fascinated by her stories. Cecily wanted to bring her with them in case they managed to escape, but during their first attempt, Silver Falcon had been discovered by the Aurora Squadron. Dr. Pickman had developed mind disruptors, devices that could emit strong signals that will interfere with their minds, causing them agonizing pain and eventually knocking them unconscious. After their failed escape, Cecily had never seen Zika and Arabella again. Dr. Pickman had used them for his experiments, extracting their consciousness and merging them into a vessel, a mechanical armor that contained all the consciousnesses that he had extracted and fused together. As she grew a bit older, Alisa volunteered to become a construct. Dr. Pickman had always said that constructs could help even more people, and Alisa wanted to fully dedicate herself to Utopia. She had been very happy after revealing the results of the procedure to Cecily, saying that Dr. Pickman had considered their parameters as good as Cecily's. Knowing what Pickman had in mind, the news could only sadden Cecily, but at least, as a construct, Alisa would have a better chance to escape from Utopia. Cecily's last escape attempt had also been a failure, and this time, Nata had been the one that paid the price. Dr. Pickman had put her inside the vessel, together with Zika and Arabella, leaving Cecily as the last member of Silver Falcon. However, Cecily didn't tell any of this to Alisa, as if instinctively trying to protect her from this harsh truth. With time, despite her words of encouragement for Alisa, Cecily starts to lose her own determination and conviction. Day by day, she feels more tired and defeated. She couldn't even remember when was the last time that she had seen the outside world. She kept re-experiencing some of her old memories with Silver Falcon, symptoms that were very similar to mind deviation after a prolonged absence of a mind beacon that she could rely on. In the end, she just wanted to see her friends again, and so she accepts to be part of Dr. Pickman's experiments, choosing to join them inside the vessel. Alisa had overheard part of Cecily and Dr. Pickman's conversation, and even if she didn't truly understand what they were saying, Alisa felt an instinctive sense of danger. She had rushed into the lab, attempting to stop them, but after her initial surprise, Cecily tells her to go back. She felt sorry for betraying Alisa, leaving her alone in that awful place, but she didn't have the strength to keep fighting anymore. Cecily told her that she shouldn't be scared, and to remember everything that she told her many times before, that eventually justice will echo through the land. Alisa couldn't even remember what had happened after, but that was the last time that she had seen Cecily, and the first time that she realized what her father had been doing. After what had happened to Cecily, Alisa had confronted Dr. Pickman, asking why he had done such a thing after having preached to devote everything to kindness and love. However, Pickman had said that was exactly why he had done it. His research was still incomplete, but eventually everyone's consciousness will be merged together. They will continue to exist in a different form. There will be no life or death for them, but they will coexist happily without the struggles that a regular living being would have to endure. His final goal was to create a true utopia. Alisa wanted to believe that her father had been misled and that he truly had the good intentions, but the seed of doubt had already been planted. Eventually, a new batch of constructs had been brought to Utopia by the Aurora Squadron. One of these constructs was named Lena, which had been identified as a troublemaker. The Aurora Squadron has said that she had been rescued and repaired after sustaining heavy injuries, and now she simply needed to repay that debt. Being in charge of Utopia moral education, Alisa had approached Lena multiple times, attempting to learn more from her. Initially, Lena had despised Alisa, seeing her as a hypocrite for upholding Utopia's ridiculous rules despite what was happening in those laboratories. Lena believed that Alisa's innocent behavior was just a facade and that she was simply attempting to pry more information from her. But eventually, Lena realized that Alisa was truly an innocent girl, misled and manipulated since she was a child. Alisa learns that Lena had never been rescued by the Aurora Squadron. Lena was a member of Caribou, a Babylonian elite squad that were directly under Commander Nicola, similarly to Cerberus. She had been investigating unusual disappearances in the nearby conservation areas when the Aurora Squadron had captured her. It was only then that Lena had realized that these disappearances were related to the people that had joined Utopia, misled with the promise of food and shelter. Between Lena's revelations and her own investigations, Alisa had also discovered that many Utopia residents that had been detained for breaking the rules were instead imprisoned because they had attempted to escape. All the people that eventually disappeared had not left Utopia. They had been used by Dr. Pickman for his experiments. Upon realizing that this had been the fate of the other members of Silver Falcon, Alisa was determined to stop her father and free everyone that wanted to escape. However, Lena stops her, knowing that without a proper plan, Alisa will simply get herself killed. During her captivity, Lena starts teaching Alisa how to use a bow, and tells her many other things about the outside world. She kept telling her to keep herself safe and to never fully trust anyone. In the meantime, Alisa was using her knowledge about Utopia to make escape plans, and her determination became almost obsessive. Worried about her, Lena told her to calm down, but eventually they managed to gather a sizable group of people that also wanted to escape. During their escape, Alisa found a journal left behind by Dr. Pickman. And upon reading some of its entries, Alisa finally realized that his father had not been misled. From the very beginning, Utopia had been created with the intention of nurturing perfect samples for his experiments, and that Alisa was his perfect creation. Lena finds Alisa with tears in her eyes, and as she flips through the journal herself, Alisa tells her that she is a mistake that shouldn't exist, that her entire life and beliefs had been manufactured. Lena says that no one is born a sin. She had been lied to, but her sense of justice was not a mistake, and if she wanted to pursue freedom, she needed to get out of there first. Despite being overwhelmed by intense emotions, Alisa kept following Lena through the tunnel, but eventually they were discovered by the Aurora Squadron. There had been some traders between the people that they tried to escape with, and in the end, almost everyone had been brought back to Utopia. That had been only the first escape attempt, but after that failure, Lena had been put under heavy surveillance, and since many of the tunnels had also been blocked, they never managed to make it out. After every failure, Pickman would speak to Alisa, trying to understand why she wanted to escape, and eventually he had even attempted to put her inside the armor. However, Alisa's mind had been rejected by the consciousnesses already in it, as if Cecily and all the others had been trying to protect Alisa even in death. Because of this, Alisa didn't become part of the armor, but her mind had still established a connection with the mind of the girls already inside of it. After that incident, Alisa could hear Cecily talk every now and then inside her mind, and sometimes Cecily could even take over Alisa's mind and body. Dr. Pickman didn't know about this, and Alisa took advantage of it. Through this connection, Cecily had told her how to obtain some data from the laboratory, an encryption key that she could use to disable the control room's internal system. However, she never managed to decrypt it. Since she had established a connection with the armor, Alisa's own mind had become somewhat unstable. Eventually, she had attempted another escape with Lena, but the two ended up separating from each other during the commotion that Lena caused in the laboratory. Alisa's mind had been under attack during the escape, and her own frame had started to malfunction. The Aurora Squadron must have used mind disruptors, and she vaguely remembers Lena giving her a Babylonian terminal, telling her to run. In the end, she couldn't even remember how she got out of Utopia, but once outside, Alisa had used Lena's terminal to disguise herself as Lena, a Babylonian construct, but eventually, something within her mind started to change. Even if initially it had been a simple disguise, Lena's own mind started to take over. Alisa ended up forgetting her true self and her memories of Utopia, as if her entire mind had been replaced by Lena. Seemingly unaware of her recent experience in Utopia, Lena uses her terminal to enter in contact with Commander Nicola once again. Nicola knew that something was off about this Lena, especially after her mysterious disappearance over a year ago. However, since she was a former member of Caribou, a team under his direct control, Nicola kept the situation strictly confidential. He suspected Kurono's involvement, and he needed more time to investigate what was going on. To avoid rising suspicion, Nicola kept her on the surface, assigning her a mission to hunt Babylonian defectors. Using the intel of the purifying force that Nicola had provided, Lena was able to track down Cecily, a former member of Ygritte that had defected Babylonia during the Pulia Forest Park incident. Lena had asked Cecily to surrender, saying that Babylonia will give him a just and fair trial, but Cecily had laughed at that, saying that since he became a transcendent, Babylonia will just lock him up to study him. Cecily activates his electromagnetic trap, disabling Lena's frame, but he had no intention of killing her. She was also a potential candidate that could pass the filtering process and join the Ascendants, and he believed that eventually she will realize that it was the best option for her. Cecily leaves her there, and when the effects of the electromagnetic trap wears off, Lena receives a new message on her terminal. She has been transferred to a new team called Iris Warbler, and their mission is to explore the newly discovered city inside the Clean Zone. Since her new teammates are still in Babylonia, Lena starts to scout the city on her own. She discovers that the city is inhabited and maintained by weird mechanoids obsessed with art. Before the Hydro Tower appearance and reversal, that entire area had been considered a dead zone with a very high concentration of punishing virus, but it seemed like these mechanoids have been there since then and they don't show any signs of infection. Most mechanoids are not hostile, but the entire city is under the effect of a strong electromagnetic signal that blocks every communication from outside. The city was named Constellia, and it had been abandoned while still under construction after the punishing outbreak. Eventually, the other members of Iris Warbler land in Constellia, joining Lena. Isla of the World Government Association of Art was the captain, while Troyan, a veteran consort that had been fighting since the post-pandemic era, was the other consort. Their commandant was a recently graduated student named Seke, and despite her knowledge, she was still inexperienced. Used to working alone, Lena is not very forthcoming toward the other members of Iris Warbler. She had been assigned to the team only temporarily, so she just wanted to complete this mission and leave. Together, Iris Warbler explores the city of Constellia. They learn from the mechanoids that the city is administered by another mechanoid named Cervantes. Upon reaching his museum, they discover that Cervantes had been the one that had revealed the city of Constellia to Babylonia, as if he had been extending an invitation to them. He had also prepared very detailed simulations of some recent events, and after interacting with them, Iris Warbler obtained various memory chips. They contained the information about Cervantes' past, which was directly connected to the origin of Constellia, a city that had been backed by multiple factions during the Golden Age. One of these factions had been Kurono, and they were still interested in Constellia. As they were still exploring Cervantes' museum, Iris Warbler receives a communication from Ygritte and Grey Raven, informing them that they have also been dispatched to Constellia. Apparently, Kurono special forces had also entered the city. They are trying to locate and test the subject that escaped from one of their laboratories, and Iris Warbler's new mission was to find it before Kurono. A while back, after having lost both Az and Luna, Conlace had lost his position within Kurono. But now he was collaborating with Leonardo Norman to regain some of his former influence. Troyan was working for them, and they had worked behind the scenes to put her in Iris Warbler, attempting to gather information on Constellia and the escaped test subject. From the very beginning, Lena had been very suspicious of Troyan, and she believed that Nicola had assigned Lena to Iris Warbler to prevent further infiltrations from Kurono. As they attempt to locate the test subject, Isla eventually separates from the rest of her team, and during this time, Lena starts to experience extreme pain within her mind, as if constantly assaulted by a myriad of different voices. Eventually, Lena, Troyan, and Seke locate a mechanical knight armor. As they approach it, Lena's interference within her mind becomes even stronger, and she realizes that the voices are coming from within the armor, as if they're calling for her. Before they can even attempt to retrieve the armor, Kurono's constructs also arrive in the area. They order Iris Warbler to leave, saying that they have more authority over a task force team. However, pushed by the voices within her mind, Lena attacks them. During the following confrontation, Lena shatters the glass case around the armor. Troyan attempts to stop Lena before she can establish a stronger connection with it, but the knight armor stops Troyan instead. As Lena fully connects with the knight armor, an echo of voices resounds within her mind. However, the intense pain that she had felt before is gone, as if she had re-established her complete self. She is not Lena anymore. They are Echo. Cervantes had told Isla that he retrieved the Knight armor mostly out of curiosity, and he had not expected Lena to come back here in that form. Also, he tells her that the armor is currently connected to Constellia's systems, and since it has a massive computing power, she should be very careful. Isla didn't know what he meant by that, but upon rejoining the rest of her team, she finds a severely injured Trojan and many dismembered Chrono constructs. She notices that Lena is now wearing a mask, and that the mechanical armor is hovering at her side. Isla tries to understand what happened and if Lena is being controlled by the test subject, but Echo says that it's not a test subject. They have their own names, their souls buried in the past, echoes reforged from lust and sin. Through her connection to Constellia's system, Echo notices that the Purifying Force has already arrived in the city, attempting to capture her. She warns Isla to leave them alone, and after sending a few Constellia mechanoids against her, Echo escapes with the armor. Attempting to find an escape route out of Constellia, Echo reaches the rooftop of the building, but eventually Isla catches up to her. Still not understanding what is going on, Isla simply wants to make Lena return to be her regular self, but Echo has no intention of returning to Babylonia. Echo believes that deep down, Babylonia is not so different from Chrono. They both wanted to use them, discard them if they cannot, or destroy them if they get in the way. Still determined to save her teammate, Isla attempts to disrupt the connection between Lena and the Knight armor, but at the end of their confrontation, both Echo and Isla are severely damaged. Barely able to stand, Isla throws her lance at the armor, still hoping to break the connection with Lena, but the armor takes the nearly unconscious Echo in its arms and jumps off the tower. Holding the unconscious Echo in its arms, the damaged armor hides in Constellia, but eventually Teasel finds them and leads them to safety. When Echo regained her senses, her memories were still a mess. She remembered being Alisa, but she had only a vague recollection of what had happened in Constellia, as if all this time it hadn't been quite herself. Still believing that Alisa could become a transcendent, Teasel asked her to join him, but since Alisa had very different principles, she had refused his offer. Alisa wanted to pursue righteousness and justice, but Teasel had no intention to deal with such a naive perspective, and in the end, the two had separated. Once fully recovered, Alisa started to remember about her escape from Utopia with Lena. However, some parts were still missing. She couldn't quite remember if she had been separated from her, but assuming that Lena had also escaped, Alisa wanted to find her. Despite her hazy memories about Constellia, Alisa knew that both Chrono and Babylonia were still looking for her. Upon searching for Lena in many conservation areas, she has seen both constructs from the Aurora Squadron and the Purifying Force actively looking for her. At this point, Alisa had fully realized that the main consciousness inside the Knight armor was Cecily, and that despite acting mostly on instinct, he had always attempted to protect her in every circumstance. However, since Babylonia had classified the armor as a dangerous bioweapon, Alisa had to leave Cecily hidden in the forest whenever she ventured into a new conservation area. Despite her efforts, Alisa didn't find a single trace of Lena in any of the conservation areas that she had visited, but she ended up encountering us. Babylonia has sent us on the surface together with Lee to investigate the disappearance of multiple people from some conservation areas nearby the clean zone. Initially, attacks from other creatures had been considered the cause, but since it was happening too frequently and leaving no signs of struggle, it seemed like someone else had been involved. Not entirely sure about the origin of those memories, Alisa remembered people talking highly about the commandant of Grey Raven. Almost pushed by those memories, Alisa decides to take the risk and approach us. She says that her name is Echo, a construct from Utopia, a secret laboratory base of the Aurora Squadron. We have no idea about either of those, but Echo mentions that Utopia reports to something in Babylonia called Chrono. At this point, we realize that Echo is that escape test subject that both Chrono and the Purifying Force had been looking for, someone considered to be extremely dangerous. We point our gun at her, but Echo raises her hands, showing that she has no intention of attacking us. She says that she is not Lena, but she was one of Utopia's test subjects. She is currently searching for the real Lena, but the Aurora Squadron is also after her. She is looking for our help in locating Lena, and in exchange, she is willing to guide us to Utopia and tell us everything that she knows about it. We don't have any evidence to confirm Echo's words. However, our mission in Constellia had been to retrieve the escape test subject before Chrono, while the Purifying Force had been deployed with orders to eliminate it, which meant that someone had been attempting to hide something. Sika herself had been suspicious about the situation. She had told us that Lena had established a connection with the armor when attempting to protect them from Kurono's soldiers. However, it made no sense that a Caribou member would be able to connect to it, so something about their identity had been off. Also, Sika had asked us to not report findings about Lena immediately to the Purifying Force. She suspected that something else involving Kurono was going on, and she was attempting to investigate the situation herself. Because of all this, even if we can't fully trust Echo, we agreed to collaborate with her for the time being. Echo had approached us when we were alone, but Lee had been nearby, listening to our conversation. Being a former Kurono agent himself, Lee believes that Echo is too inexperienced to be one of them. The following day, we start investigating other conservation areas with Echo, while Lee follows us from a distance, ready to intervene in case something went wrong. As we travel, she starts telling us her story about growing up in Utopia, befriending Cecily and the other members of Silver Falcon. How she had discovered about Dr. Pickman's research and the fact that everyone in Utopia was meant to become a sample for his experiments. After learning what he had done to Cecily and the rest of Silver Falcon, Echo wanted to put an end to Utopia, but she couldn't do it alone. She needed our help, and she also needed to find Lena, someone that had taught her a lot and had helped her escape from Utopia. Upon reaching Conservation Area 112, Echo starts to experience acute pain within her mind, which eventually becomes so intense that Echo is nearly knocked unconscious. We spot a nearby drone installed with some sort of mind disruptor device, and Lee destroys it from afar. We establish a deep connection with Echo, trying to stabilize her, and in the process, we learn even more about Utopia and Dr. Pickman. We sent all this information to Asimov, which had been secretly working with us to stop Kurono's experiments. Babylonia had to collaborate with them in the past, using Project Winter data to build the Imperia frame. However, after having obtained more data from Fort Winter, it was very clear that the experiments had sacrificed many resources and human lives. Asimov wanted to prove that they weren't just morally wrong, since that would not stop certain people, but they were also scientifically ineffective, proving that other research avenues were not only more productive, but that also did not require the sacrifice of human lives. Since then, we had been trying to collect even more data about Kurono for him. Once Echo recovers from the effects of the mind disruptor, we continue our investigation and find traces of Lena inside a small aircraft, which Echo identifies as one of the smaller flying fortresses that can detach from Utopia. Apparently, Lena had attempted to infiltrate Utopia's outer fortresses multiple times. They don't really know how all this data is, but it seems like Lena had been planning to investigate Conservation Area 107 next, where multiple people had also been reported as missing. In Conservation Area 107, we locate constructs from the Aurora Squadron. People seemed used to their presence, and many of them had been offered an opportunity to join Utopia. Echo had tried multiple times to warn people about Utopia in other conservation areas, but no one had listened to her. This time, we decide to hide and track the Aurora Squadron to their base. As we follow them deeper into the forest, Echo starts to feel an intense pain in her mind. She says that they must have deployed a mind disruptor device in the area, but as long as we stay connected to her, she can endure it. However, once we infiltrate the flying fortress landed in the area, we found ourselves surrounded by multiple mind disruptors. It had been a trap left behind by Dr. Pickman, which was still trying to retrieve Alisa. As we shut them down ourselves, Lee shows up and neutralizes the Aurora Squadron. We establish another deep connection with Echo, stabilizing her mind once again, and with the help of a task force squad that we had contacted earlier, we free the people that had been gathered by the Aurora Squadron and relocate them to another conservation area. Lee informs us that the Sarius and the Purifying Force are still attempting to locate Echo. He had been spreading some misinformation to delay them, but apparently someone else was also doing the same. Collins and Norman had sent Troyan with that purpose in mind. They wanted to prevent both Kurono and the Purifying Force from capturing the test subject and, if possible, retrieve it themselves. Now that Babylonia was more involved in the situation, Echo gives us a memory device. It was the same one that she had stolen from Utopia following Cecily's instructions. It contained the key that will give them access to Utopia's control system, but she never managed to get through the encryption. We send it to Asimov, and Echo thanks us again for helping her. Looking at the knight armor, she mumbles the word that Cecily had told her long ago. Justice will echo through the land. We ask her if that was the reason why she changed her name to Echo, but she blushes at that remark. Still looking at the armor, she just says that she doesn't want to let them down. Upon locating another flying fortress, we find more signs of Lena, and once inside, we find her hologram. It seemed to be a recorded message for Alisa. Lena was apologizing to her, saying that she was back in Utopia. She was exhausted and she just wanted to rest, but she was sorry for leaving Alisa on her own. However, she was sure that they would meet again eventually. Not understanding why Lena was saying such things, Echo is extremely upset by the message. We believe it had been left behind by Pickman, attempting to make Echo doubt herself, and eventually Pickman himself appears on a huge screen. He tells Echo that everyone is waiting for her in Utopia, trying to convince her to come back. Upon seeing him, we recognize him immediately as Kugawa Kurono, the same doctor that had been working at the start of life when Kurono had kept us under surveillance, accusing us of colluding with an Ascendant after the incident of City 075. Pickman says that he was ashamed that Babylonia had been very protective towards us. After seeing our inspection report, he had considered us an excellent vessel, even better than all the girls that he had collected so far, which would have made us one of the best samples for his experiments. The flying fortress suddenly takes off, and Pickman attempts to retrieve the both of us, deploying the Aurora Squadron and multiple Mind Disruptor devices from another flying fortress. Echo and Cecily are able to deal with them, but the toll on her already weary mind is becoming progressively worse. After returning to the conservation area, we consider sending her to Babylonia so that Asimov can take care of her. Echo had promised that she will follow us to Babylonia, but not before putting an end to Utopia. Fearing that she might be transferred there anyway, Echo leaves the conservation area on her own and uses her terminal to contact Pickman, saying that she wants to return to Utopia. Pickman sends a set of coordinates to Alisa so that she can be picked up by one of the flying fortresses. In Utopia, Pickman had never stopped his experiments. He had extracted and fused many other consciousnesses inside another vessel. His project was almost complete, but he still needed the final sample, a strong consciousness that could assert its control over all the others. From one of his screens, he sees that Alisa has returned to Utopia, but she is attempting to fight her way through. All the struggles were making her into a better sample for the vessel, but at the same time, she had grown to be more problematic than he had ever expected. With absolute confidence in his research, Pickman had always been prepared for an alternative approach. Trusting his other researchers and former students, Pickman decides to enter into the vessel himself, and as his fused consciousness takes over, he attempts to connect to the Ascension Network to become an Ascendant. However, when Echo finally finds her father, she discovers that Pickman has turned into a corrupted. He had been rejected by the Ascension Network. Still delusional, Pickman tries to convince her into joining him. A part of Alisa still sees him as the loving father that she had grew up with. The father that had always listened to her, complimented her on her achievements, and consoled her whenever she cried. But he was also the person that had killed Cecily and all the others. Mastering her resolve, Echo eventually kills her father. In the meantime, Liv and Lucy had also joined us and Lee on the surface. After tracking Echo's location, we had also boarded Utopia and used the key decreted by Asimov to lock all the flying vessels in place, preventing them from detaching so that no one could escape. While Echo dealt with Pickman, Grey Raven wiped out the Aurora Squadron. The central fortress began to collapse, causing massive explosions all over the base. It seemed like Kurono was attempting to destroy all the data that could have been retrieved by Babylonia, removing any information that could lead to them. With the help of Grey Raven, we managed to evacuate and land safely on the surface from the collapsing fortress. A severely injured Echo also emerges from the smoke. Cecily is supporting her, but she is not alone. Echo also hears Lena's voice, supporting her through her mind. It's at this point that Echo truly realizes that all along, Lena had been with her and that she had never left Utopia. When Alisa had escaped, Lena had been captured by the Aurora Squadron, and Pickman had put her into the armor. It was why Lena had managed to take over Alisa's body after escaping. She had been trying to protect Alisa even then, and since her mind had been in a weakened state, she had fully taken over without even realizing it. Upon seeing the injured Echo, Liv rushes in to check on her. Echo tells us that Pickman is dead, and she gives us a memory chip that she had retrieved from Utopia. She says that Lena had always been with her, inside the armor, but Cecily's mind was in chaos now. We promise her that Babylonia will do its best to help them, and Echo falls unconscious from the exhaustion. After recovering, Echo had buried all the corpses that she could find, since they belonged to the people of Utopia. She had made a tombstone for them, and we find her standing before it together with Cecily. She says that Lena is also part of Cecily's mind now, but before leaving Utopia, Echo had found her name tag. She asks us to deliver it to Sika. Echo still can't quite remember everything that had happened in Constellia, but she believes that it is what Lena would have wanted. Echo says that she plans to hunt down the rest of Aurora's squadron that escaped from Utopia. She believes that some of the flying fortresses have already been dispatched somewhere else, and she wants to prevent the birth of another Utopia. Before departing, she uses one of her complicated salutes in accordance to the war government etiquette. Since she has almost no experience outside of Utopia, we finally tell her that no one uses them anymore, and Echo is shocked and embarrassed since she had been using them with us all this time. This is most late for Alisa's story so far. Many of these events happened after the Hedro Tower appearance, so we don't know how much will change in the new timeline. Unless they want to bring out a playable Lena in the future, I believe that almost everything about Utopia will stay the same. However, without the Hedro Tower, Constellia should be inside a dead zone, so either way, that part should be quite different. And if not Lena, maybe we can finally get a playable Trojan. Anyway, as usual, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.